Hey guys, welcome to my channel. The Super Bowl was on Sunday, so we are officially in draft season. It is the end of the 2023 season, and we're gearing up for the 2024 NFL Draft in April. And what we're going to be doing in this video series is going through position by position throughout the draft, from top to bottom, where the quality might be, how deep each position group is this year, and who my favourite options are. I'm particularly looking at these players from an LA Rams perspective, but hopefully it'll be useful to and interesting to anyone, regardless of what team you support. And as I said, we're going to be looking not just at these big name players, but also the people that might be available in day 2, day 3, and understand what sort of players that Les Snead and the LA Rams might be looking for and what skill sets they're trying to add. I'm going to break down the positions and release them week by week, and hopefully we'll get through every position group before the draft, but what I'm basing my order on is the Rams draft needs according to NFL Mock Draft Database. What the database website does is it assesses who's being drafted at what positions across the internet for the Rams, and tries to create a list of team needs based on that. So I'm going to be using that. It won't be a surprise to most Rams fans. There's going to be a big emphasis on the defense this year. There's going to be another emphasis is going to be the offensive line and how they build in some future to that line, how they get some longevity in there, and those are going to be the main focuses. But I'm going to go position by position, and this week I'm going to be looking at the cornerbacks position, and this is obviously a massive need for the Rams. I think it was really where they lost the wildcard game against the Lions. They just couldn't stop the Lions offense in the first half and let them put up far too many points, and had too far to come back from once they finally clamped down. And obviously the Rams have replaced Raheem Morris, now the head coach of the Atlanta Falcons, with Chris Shula. So you'd expect a lot of the schematic philosophies to continue from what they've had with Morris, and before him the other two coordinators that Chris Shula worked under. So there's probably some patterns from past drafts that we could lean into and understand what the Rams want. But a few things that I picked out. Well, firstly, the Rams are probably going to want 3 starters out of this offseason. They haven't found answers at the cornerback position. Akello Witherspoon was probably the best cornerback on the roster, and he is a unrestricted free agent this year. I don't know if they'll bring him back. He definitely had his flashes, but also had some poor moments towards the end of the year that maybe makes them not want to invest in him long term, and he will probably command quite a decent contract. So I could see them going in a different direction if they can find the players. Rams particularly like cornerbacks who can tackle well. Sean McVay, the great head coach he is not a very patient man. He doesn't like to give up a big play, and I think probably loses his patience with people quite quickly if they're regularly giving up crucial plays. So Darian Kendrick's days might be numbered for that reason. He was dropped twice this year and made his way back into the team each time from injuries. And so I think they're going to be looking to upgrade his position, and also in the slot too. Players who can tackle are particularly important to that. The Rams' philosophy is always not giving up big plays, not giving up turnovers, trying to minimize those single play mistakes that define a game, and they'd rather a team beat them bit by bit than give up any big plays. So having those people who are disciplined in all phases is pretty crucial to that philosophy. They've always emphasized cornerbacks who can tackle, and I think that's going to remain the same. Just having that sort of competitive willingness as well as the ability to tackle, I think, is the difference, and we'll get onto that when we look at some of these prospects. Away from that, I don't think the Rams have any particular thresholds necessarily. They've often had a lot of smaller corners, so I don't think there's necessarily any arm length measurements we need to particularly keep an eye on. But Raheem Morris commented in the season that they had one guy over 6 foot, and I think there's an awareness there that they do potentially set themselves up for some physical mismatches by having all of these shorter corners on the roster. So I think there's going to be an element of finding improvements, but also considering what skill sets they don't have currently and trying to find people who can fill those skill sets. So that's going to be an emphasis, I think. The Rams have kind of moved away from the analytics draft model that took over a little bit a few years ago. They're definitely looking at players in terms of their ability and what they put on tape. Not going to be so wowed by combine performances and things like that. So I think it's a good time of year right now to look at what they did last year in college and assess whether they're someone the Rams might want to draft. Aside from those kind of basic headlines of the players they might want to look for at corner, I think the Rams are going to be thinking about what they didn't do last year on defense, and they just didn't create turnovers. And that when you've got an offense that's as high-powered as Sean McVay's, the more times you can get the ball off the other team's offense, the better. And for several years now, they've not really been able to generate turnovers with any regularity. So I think that will be something that is in the back of their minds when they're looking at these prospects. And they've been playing these zone coverages, shell coverages, too high safety, things like that, for quite a while now, the Fangio style defense. And I can see them looking for a bit more scheme versatility in the players they're drafting. They box themselves into a corner a little bit, and there's been a gradual shift towards introducing more man coverages again, without the personnel being there to do that all the time. So I can see them looking for players who are a bit more scheme versatile and offer that for them going forward, so that it's an option at least, even if they still have quite a strong emphasis on zone coverage. And just finally, we know the Rams are looking to the future. Les Snead commented on it at the end of the season. They're not just looking at what edges they're missing from the roster in 2023, which is the words he used. He also said we're also thinking about the players and the edges that we might lose in the future, and we don't know when we might lose. And when I hear that, I can hear him referring to the Cooper Kupps, the Matthew Staffords, the Aaron Donalds. They are looking for future defensive cornerstones that they can rely on. Ernest Jones is potentially one of those players if they can extend him. They've found answers on the D-line in terms of Byron Young and Kobe Turner, who can be there for a long time and fulfill that role. But in the secondary, they just don't have those players. So I can see them looking for a headline draft player in the secondary who they can see being there, not just for 4 or 5 years on a rookie contract, but can earn an extension and be really a tone setter for the back end of the defense going forward. So yeah, certainly a few things to keep in mind when we're looking at these prospects at what they might want out of the position. I think that introduction leads on quite neatly into my first prospect that I want to look at. We're going to look at a couple of prospects who the Rams could realistically take with their first pick in the draft, which is actually a first round pick for the first time in many, many years. And they are going to be looking for one of those cornerstone players I mentioned, someone to build their defense around. And I think top of the list in the cornerback group for me is Terrion Arnold out of Alabama. He's going to be 21 years old when the draft comes around, and he probably came into the year being viewed as the second cornerback on the Alabama roster. Kool-Aid McKinstry was the headliner, and so there were a lot of teams that challenged him, threw at him, thinking that he would be the softer option on the outside, and he really stood up. He had 5 interceptions and 17 passes defended, so he stacked up the stats, and that'll be something that will be on the Rams coach's mind when they're thinking about those turnovers from last year, or the lack of, and he was someone who showed that he can rack up those numbers. He was also one of the top graded run defenders, which again we've discussed is going to be important to the Rams. They want that discipline. They want to keep people one-dimensional. They want to cut off the easy yards and really force teams to test them. And having a good run defender on the outside helps that, and keeps the contain His overall PFF grade was 88.3, so graded out very well, and shows that consistency across the board. And he's got versatility. He was recruited as a safety. He moved inside to the nickel quite a lot during the season, and moved around because he was on the same roster as Kool-Aid McKinstry, Eli Ricks, Brian Branch. He was just there trying to get as many snaps as possible. He's a good size. By no means does he project as a nickel corner. He can definitely play outside. He's listed as 6 foot, 195 pounds on the Alabama team website. But I think where he really wins is he's an intelligent player who combines that with exceptional athleticism. He diagnoses plays really well. We'll get to a few clips in a second. And just quite an all-round cornerback prospect who I think you could really rely on, plug and play straight away on the outside, and that's what the Rams desperately need out of this draft. He may not be there for them at pick 19. He's moved up on people's draft boards, definitely being looked at as the number one cornerback prospect now. So may not be an option for them, but certainly my top option at the position. Not many drawbacks from him. He can be a little bit handy in coverage. That might need to be polished up a bit against NFL teams with NFL officiating. Sometimes he arrives a little late to the catch point, but it's not really a real criticism because he's usually in a position to make the play regardless. So a few little things that he might want to polish up. Hasn't had tons of starts because of that competition on the Alabama roster, but when he has started, he's looked very much like the best corner on the field. We're just going to look at a few clips here. Firstly, one against Ole Miss. Really just shows how he performs in man coverage. And can stick with his man all the way down the field. Quick reactions, gets the ball, knocks it out of the air very effectively. And that's what he did game in, game out this year. You can see from his statistics. Passes defended, 17. When people tested him, they soon found out they shouldn't. I personally really like his tape against LSU. I think he had an excellent game. He did have an interception in that game, and it might have been his least impressive play. He went toe-to-toe with the LSU offense, which could have 3 top 15 picks on it this year. And he definitely looked the part. I talked about his tackling ability and how important that might be to the Rams. Well, this play shows it perfectly. It shows play diagnosis, the trigger to get forward, powers through Brian Edwards Jr. and does enough to make the tackle. Basically a tackle for loss. Brilliant play from him. This time sort of shows his ability to pass off his man in coverage first. Trust that his safeties are going to deal with the man over the top, which is Malik Neighbors. And then he breaks on the ball, covers ground in no time, prevents there being any yards after the catch. Again, another wide receiver there who's going to be drafted very high. So as you can see, very talented corner. Very much expect him to be gone in the top 20 picks, if not to the Rams, to someone else. But fingers crossed, they'll be there when the Rams come to pick. Now, this year is definitely an offense-heavy draft class. You don't usually expect to be at pick 19 and have the option of the best cornerback on the board. So I've watched quite carefully a lot of the guys that sit behind the top 2 of Terrion Arnold and Kool-Aid McKinstry. Really like Cooper DeJean. Not going to be looking at him specifically, but definitely someone I could see the Rams taking. But the player that I saw when I first looked at the Senior Bowl rosters, and he jumped off the page to me as someone the Rams would 100% look at and be interested in, was Quinyon Mitchell out of Toledo. Another outside corner, really is moving up draft boards now after his performance at the Senior Bowl. And I think one of the reasons for that is he played a lot of off-man coverage, zone coverage, in college. That's just the scheme they were operating, and obviously lines up quite nicely for the Rams. But what he went into the Senior Bowl and did was just showed exactly what he can do in press, and went one-on-one with all of the great wide receivers who were there, and just won every time. He's got a very intelligent play style, which I really like. He often finds the leverage points against the receiver, particularly showed it in these one-on-ones, how he was directing the receiver to where he wanted them, really manipulating them, using his physicality to do it, and just, controlling that player in front of him. And that's something we didn't necessarily see loads of on his college tape. I think he often goads the opposition quarterback, shows some space between him and the guy he's covering, particularly when he's an off man, because he knows he's got that trigger, got that closing speed. So once the ball's in the air, the quarterback thinks the guy's open, he can just shut that play down instantly. And it really reminded me of Jalen Ramsey's ability to do that as well. The sort of corner who doesn't get looked at too often by quarterbacks and gets bored because they're covering too well. And so they start toying with the quarterbacks when they're playing at a higher level than them. You saw it Jalen Ramsey on the Rams. He would just create fake open receivers, and as soon as the ball's in the air, he's back where he needs to be. I saw some similarities there, which may well be appealing to a Rams staff, including Chris Shula, who obviously knew Jalen Ramsey very well. He is a willing tackler. He does contribute against the run, but technique isn't quite as good as Terrion Arnold. He goes low a bit too often. I think he does enough in the run game, but what does worry me is when he's going to be tackling much more physical pass catchers in the NFL, particularly thinking about the likes of Deebo Samuel and Christian McCaffrey. And if you're trying to get the NFC crown off the 49ers, you're going to want someone who can be physical and really impose themselves on the outside. I'm not sure he's there yet. I think he could be. He's certainly got the size and the ability and the willingness to do it, but definitely an area that needs a bit more work. I'm just going to show you one clip. This is from the MAC Championship game. It was a crucial third down, and he starts off in the slot. He moves around a bit, but primarily an outside corner. And I just really like his play diagnosis here. He sees the motion, doesn't get too drawn in by it, keeps his eye on number one, and then runs with him the whole way, considers jumping the route if the ball's going outside in the flat, sees the wide receiver running deeper and just sticks with him step by step and makes the play on the ball. I think that shows his ability perfectly. Play diagnosis, intelligence, makes the right decisions at the right moments, split-second decisions, and then he's there to make the play because he's just sticky in coverage. So Quinyon Mitchell from Toledo, I think he's definitely an option for the Rams at pick 19. Historically, teams have been able to find good starters, not just in the first round, second round, third round in particular, have been very good places for teams to find legitimate starting cornerbacks. There's also quite a lot of undrafted free agent cornerbacks in the league who are getting starting reps. I've done a bit of analysis on this, just looking at the 3 cornerbacks on every team who took the most snaps last year. And no surprises, the first and second round lead the way, both with 21 players each. But just behind that is undrafted free agents. That 19 of the 96 starting cornerbacks in the league last year were undrafted. So I think it's definitely a position where you can find these players and develop them over a few years. Darius Williams is a really good example of someone the Rams claimed off waivers, stashed on their practice squad or at the back end of the roster. He wasn't active for games for 18 months maybe before he started getting starting snaps as a cornerback, and obviously then went on and won himself a big contract and is still playing at a high level. So there's definitely those players where if you see something in them, you can get them onto the roster and start to develop them. There's not a great number of starters that were found in day 3. So if you do have a need, that kind of suggests to me you want to be looking at day 1 or day 2 picks to try and address that, unless you're really happy to be patient and invest in certain players. There's obviously a few exceptions. Deron Bland is an easy one to think of. He wasn't planned to be a starter, but came in due to injuries for the Cowboys. L'Jarius Sneed has become a very good player. There's a few players like that. Tariq Woolen, people remember from a couple of years ago. But certainly looking across the board, perhaps some of these are outliers. If you want a starter, pick them on day 1 or day 2. The Pro Bowlers over the last decade were selected in the first round, by far and away the most out of any pick point. Probably not a surprise. Round 2, 21% of Pro Bowlers were selected in the second round. And then after that, it really drops off. 4% from the third round, 4% from the fourth round, none from rounds 6 and 7. So if you're looking for that high-end talent, day 1, day 2. If you're looking for starters, the same. And so that kind of plays into what we might expect the Rams to do in the draft. I actually think this draft has quite good depth at cornerback. There's some really nice prospects who won't necessarily become headline players. They will just be competent. They've got good size, good length, can play inside and outside. And of course, it really depends how coaches use these players, whether they get the best out of them or not. I always think that teams should look at what a player can do, not what they can't do, and figure out how you build that into your defense. With that in mind, there's quite a few players who are likely to be day 2 picks, potentially round 5, round 6 if they slide down the draft board, who I think could genuinely become starting impact players for the Rams on defense. Probably top of that list for me is Kamal Hadden out of Tennessee, and I'm really surprised how much Hadden is flying under the radar right now. He is 6'1", 197 pounds, so perfect NFL size for an outside corner. He had an 85.7 PFF grade in 2023, and part of the reason he's not in the limelight at the moment is he had a season-ending shoulder injury, had surgery, missed a few games, and therefore didn't put together a full season. But he did play in 7 games, and I'll give you some of his statistics. Obviously, stats aren't everything, but it's quite impressive. So in 2023, he played 7 games, as I mentioned, was targeted 33 times and only allowed 12 completions. So already a good sign. 12 completions for 96 yards, no touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. So really good statistically. Quarterbacks throwing into his coverage had a passer rating of just 7. And so it really blows my mind that no one's really talking about Hadden as a draft pick at the moment. For example, PFF have him as the 173rd player on their big board, which would put him at the back end of the 5th round. NFL Mock Draft Database have him even further back at 240th. And so he seems to be projecting as kind of a 5th, 6th round pick. And I just don't see how a player with his talent can fall that far. It may just be that media hasn't picked up on him, but the team certainly have. Reminds me of Mekhi Blackman last year. He was the USC cornerback. I really liked him. He had a really good PFF grade, both in man and zone coverage, but was projected as a 6th round pick and was ultimately actually taken at the back end of the 3rd round by the Vikings. I think pick 101 maybe. So it doesn't necessarily correlate that because we're not hearing about him, he's not being seen by teams. But obviously the Rams have 2 3rd round picks. They've got 3 5th round picks. And if they got him at any of those pick points, I'd be really happy about it. Hadden's a really willing tackler. He's physical. And I think earlier in his college career, he had some problems with being overly physical. He's definitely wound it in a bit. He's really controlled. His timing's very good now, I think. He arrives with aggressive hands, but not too soon, isn't grabby. And I really like how he just stays sticky to his man, keeps them on his shoulder, doesn't give them room to operate, doesn't let them have grass to work with, forces them to the sideline. And I'm going to show you a couple of clips of his. Firstly, a pass breakup, which was from the Texas A&M game this year. And it shows his quick trigger. It shows his ability to arrive on time, get the ball. He always finds the ball in the air and break up the pass. Just, that is a classic Kamal Hadden clip. He does it all the time. There's plenty of clips on his highlight reels of him doing that. This next one is what I was saying about and not giving receivers room to operate. He really keeps close to them, running in step without needing to be grabbing them or pushing them. Just as soon as the ball arrives, his hands are in the air, and he's just making it really difficult for the receiver to keep hold of that ball and keep in bounds. And I just really like, he's got a feisty personality to him. Yeah, so Kamal Hadden's probably my sleeper of the whole draft at cornerback. I really like him. Speaking of sleepers, probably one of the most interesting stories in the draft is Qwan'tez Stiggers, who is a Toronto Argonaut from the CFL. Now, Stiggers didn't play in college due to academic reasons. He actually entered the CFL through the Fan Control League in 2022, where he was a finalist for Defensive Player of the Year. This year in the CFL, he won the Most Outstanding Rookie and finished with 5 interceptions, which is a little bit misleading because a lot of those were catches that were overthrown passes, and he was just not competing with anyone for the ball. Easy catches. But what I actually like about him is his physicality. He's a good and willing tackler, good size as well, and he takes really good angles to the ball. He played in the Shrine Bowl, and there's not really any good highlights to show you because people didn't look his way. He just covered up his man and was very effective at doing it. And I think he's turned a few heads now. There's whispers that he might not make it out of the third round from scouts at the moment. So we'll see. He's obviously an interesting prospect without any college background. But Qwan'tez Stiggers is someone that I could see the Rams taking interest in, certainly having some conversations with. There's just 2 more other cornerback prospects that I'm going to touch upon. There's plenty. There's so many more that I could go into. I actually really like this draft class, but time is limited. And one of those is Jarvis Brownlee from Louisville. He was previously at FSU, transferred to Louisville, and had a really good Senior Bowl. I believe that Aubrey Pleasant was there watching as well. So important eyes from a Rams perspective. He had a 77.9 PFF rating in 2023. And in the Senior Bowl interviews, he said that he sees himself as an NFL nickel. So I'd expect him to play there. And actually, when you watch his tape, you can understand why. He seems to love being near the line of scrimmage, being able to get dirty, make tackles, stop the ball carrier, loves a tackle for loss. But he's impressive when the ball's in the air too. Attacks the ball really well. Looked really good in one-on-ones at the Senior Bowl. And he's just got this tenacious attitude that I think would suit the Rams really well. Obviously, they're looking at the entire secondary. He's a bit undersized, 5'10", 185 pounds, but not significantly so. So could see him being someone they have interest in as a nickel cornerback. I think he's very scheme versatile, can play press man, can play zone. And so he's got that versatility that they're looking for, flips his hips really well to transition between coverages as well. So good athlete, willing tackler, physicality's there, can play the ball in the air. He's just a good all-rounder, and I think that'll put him in good stead. Teams are going to like his attitude and his play style. And despite being a little bit shorter and smaller than some of these other guys, I think that will really work in his favour, and he could really project well as a cornerback at the next level. With all those corners I've just mentioned, you're probably looking at somewhere between the 3rd and the 5th rounds in terms of projection, and that's obviously good for the Rams because they've got 5 picks in that range. But one player I just want to draw attention to, who is almost certainly going to be a day 3 pick, potentially 6th round or later, is Daequan Hardy from Penn State. He has always been a nickel cornerback at Penn State, played a few snaps on the outside, but he's 5'9", 176 pounds. He is clearly a nickel corner. He allowed a completion percentage of 47.5% in college, which is obviously decent and low. Bit of up and down production. His 2022 wasn't very good, but he was really good in 2021 and 2023. He jumped off the screen for me in their Ohio State game. He also had some really nice plays in the Peach Bowl against Ole Miss, and several 3rd down stops he had there, and plays the ball well in the air. But the main reason I want to talk about him from a Rams point of view, is that he doubles up as a punt returner. And he was one of the best punt returners in college this year, had an average return of 19 yards and had 2 touchdowns. So the Rams have been looking for a punt returner for forever. It feels like someone who can legitimately cause some damage, and I just think he'd be a very interesting option that also adds depth to the secondary. They've not been scared to have smaller cornerbacks on their roster. Maybe they're looking for something different now, but that punt return could really make him someone that they're interested in. It would not surprise me at all if one of these 11 picks they have going into the draft turns out to be a returner over and above anything else they do on the team. So yeah, Daequan Hardy from Penn State, could see him as one of those late 6th round picks. Thank you for watching this positional video for the 2024 NFL Draft. If you like the content, please do like and subscribe. We will be back every single week with a different position group, all the way up until the NFL Draft. And please, keep in touch for any Rams Draft content. You can find me on Twitter at JTPearsonNFL. Thanks a lot, guys. See you soon.